The alarm shrieked through Deck 7 of the Celestial Haven, a multi-species colony station orbiting the neutron star Kelvar 9. Renara's 4 ears flattened against her scaled head as she sprinted down the corridor, her security uniform rippling with each bound of her powerful legs. "All units, we have a code violet in the recreation sector," her comlink crackled. 23. Virillian cubs have escaped their enclosure. I repeat, 23 cubs loose. Renara's blood ran cold. Virillian cubs, each no bigger than a Terran housecat, but possessing claws that could shred durasteel, and a pack mentality that made them one of the most dangerous juvenile species in known space. Separately, they were manageable. Together, they were a natural disaster with fur and teeth. She rounded the corner to find absolute chaos. The recreation sector looked like a war zone. Benches were overturned. Holographic displays flickered and sparked where tiny claws had torn through circuitry. And the carefully maintained garden of bioluminescent plants from Andromeda Station lay in tatters. The cubs were everywhere, climbing walls, swinging from ventilation grates, their high-pitched chirping creating a cacophony that made Renara's head pound. Takor, her partner and the station's head of security, stood in the center of the maelstrom. The massive Krogothi male, easily 3 meters tall with armored plates covering his body, was trying desperately to corral the creatures. He wielded a containment net, but every time he lunged for one cub, 3 more would dart past him from different directions. "Renara," he bellowed, his voice barely audible over the chaos. "Help me corner them towards Section D." She activated her own containment equipment, a stasis field generator designed to immobilize small creatures. But Virillian cubs were fast, impossibly fast. The moment her field activated, they scattered like liquid mercury, reforming their chaotic pack formation meters away. "This isn't working," Renara shouted, dodging as a cub launched itself at her face. She caught it mid-air, but it twisted in her grip with frightening flexibility and nipped at her gloved hand before wriggling free. Takor roared in frustration, a sound that would have sent most species fleeing in terror. The cubs barely seemed to notice. If anything, they became more excited, their chirping rising to a fever pitch. More security personnel arrived as Xanthari with its crystalline exoskeleton, 2 bipedal Orvaxians, even a floating Lumine whose energy form pulsed with anxiety. They formed a perimeter, but the cubs simply climbed higher, using the ceiling panels as highways to bypass the blockade entirely. "We need to sedate them," one of the Orvaxians suggested, already preparing tranquilizer darts. "No," Renara snapped. "Virillian metabolisms are too sensitive. The wrong dosage could kill them, and then we'd have their parents to answer to." She shuddered. Adult Virillians were diplomatic members of the Galactic Council, but they were also fiercely protective. Harming their young would be a political nightmare. Another 10 minutes of futile chasing passed. The cubs seemed to be enjoying themselves, treating the entire event as an elaborate game. Takor's armor bore dozens of scratch marks. Renara's uniform was torn in 3 places, and the sector looked progressively worse with each passing moment. "Someone contact Dr. Yeneth," Takor commanded, breathing heavily. "Maybe the xenobiologist has suggestions." "Dr. Yeneth is off station," came the reply through the comm. "But there's a human in Sector 9. Should I? A human?" Renara's scales rippled with confusion. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, and their reputation was complicated. They were the species that had somehow survived a death world called Earth, the ones who saw danger as a challenge rather than a deterrent. But what could a human possibly do in this situation? "Send them," Takor decided. "We need all the help we can get." 5 minutes later, the human arrived. He was unremarkable by human standards. Renara supposed medium height, medium build, with dark hair and eyes. He wore casual civilian clothes and carried nothing but a small bag. He surveyed the chaos with an expression Renara couldn't quite read. "You're the human?" Takor asked skeptically. "Name's Marcus," the human replied calmly. watching as a cub swung from a light fixture directly above his head. "I heard you've got a cub situation." As you can see, Renara gestured at the destruction around them. "We've tried everything. They won't respond to authority, won't be corralled, and we can't use tranquilizers safely." Marcus nodded slowly, then did something that made every security officer present freeze in confusion. He sat down. Right there, on the debris-covered floor. He simply sat cross-legged and opened his bag. "What are you?" Takor began. "Shh," Marcus said gently, pulling out what looked like a wrapped sandwich and a small container. "Just watch." The human unwrapped his food, some kind of Terran protein and vegetation combination, and began eating. Slowly, calmly, as if he were having a peaceful lunch in a park, rather than sitting in the middle of a disaster zone. Renara was about to protest the absurdity when she noticed something impossible. The cubs' chirping was getting quieter. One by one, the small creatures stopped their frenzied running. Within 30 seconds, the first cub had cautiously approached Marcus. Its previous energy completely vanished. Marcus didn't look at it directly. He simply broke off a small piece of his food and placed it on the floor beside him. The cub sniffed, then ate it delicately. Then another cub approached. And another. Within 2 minutes, all 23 Virillian cubs had gathered around the human in a perfect circle. They sat quietly, their chaotic energy completely dissipated, watching him with focused attention. Occasionally, Marcus would offer a small piece of food, speaking in low, soothing tones that Renara's translator couldn't quite process. "How?" Takor's voice trailed off in disbelief. Marcus glanced up and smiled. "Pack animals recognize calm authority. You guys were all stressed, moving fast, making loud noises. To them, you were either threats or playmates. But someone who's calm, who shares food, who doesn't chase, that's someone worth listening to." He stood slowly, and the cubs rose with him, forming an orderly line. "Where's their enclosure?" Still stunned, Renara pointed. Marcus walked toward it at a leisurely pace, and the cubs followed like he was their parent. Not a single one broke formation. Within minutes, all 23 were back in their enclosure, settling down peacefully. As Marcus secured the enclosure, Renara noted he checked it thoroughly. Finding and repairing the latch the cubs had damaged, Takor approached. "That was remarkable," the Krogathi admitted. Marcus shrugged. "I grew up with 6 younger siblings and worked at an animal shelter. You learn that most creatures just want to feel safe and understood." He looked at the exhausted security team. "They're just babies, away from their parents in a strange place. They were scared, so they acted out." Renara felt something shift in her understanding of humans. They weren't just survivors of a death world. They were something more complex beings who understood both violence and gentleness, chaos and calm. "Thank you," she said genuinely. Marcus waved it off. "Anytime. Though maybe invest in better locks?" He grinned and walked away, leaving behind a team of highly trained security professionals who had just been completely outperformed by a human with a sandwich and patience. Takor watched him go, then looked at Renara. "Humans," he said simply. Renara's scales rippled in what might have been a laugh. "Yeah. Humans. Lugs. Renara's